Hello, operators. There we go. Hello, operators. Welcome to Midnight Operator, episode 6. Good to see everyone back. Got my tea. We got some people in the stream already. E-Chains, Julian Sanchez. Oh, hey, man. Thanks for your contribution, Julian. I'll talk about that in a sec. Asker, Kalan, El Shuffles, Ian, Koyodot, Kalan again, EJ, there we go. Vincent is in the stream supporting. Bolt, hello guys. Greetings from Denver. Heitner Music. So who was that mentioning? Koyodo, jamming with the new firmware. There we go. So as you know, maybe last week we had a videopak focus where we learned how to install. We looked at what's available and we learned how to install Unity. We installed the assets needed from Videolab, and we had a chat with William getting started. Today we're going to continue, but some of you already seen it. There's some news out on the site. I haven't checked it myself, but since you see it, let's see. There we go. Yeah. If I switch. So no, sorry. There we go. Okay, so we have a new OS for the OPC. It's a not a big thing. So Jonas is not here today, but if I read from the screen, improved CPU performance. He weren't happy with the last optimization, so he tweaked it a bit even more. Automatically add and assign new engines to free slots. So all the new synth engines, all the new effects and everything, you don't have to manually install it. It will be installed automatically for you when creating a new pattern. And this is interesting. Triple press to lock pattern, mixer, tempo, screen buttons. So that's cool. Let's see if we can show that. Let's go to. So as you can see, on the motion track, but I'll go to kick. Here, you have the mixer track or mixer index button here, and sometimes you may want to lock this. So now you can with 1, 2, 3, and now I can stay on this this page. This could be good for when playing live, when doing like you're setting your mix basically, and it could also be used for the tempo, for the project button. So this is great when you're playing live. You can be here and jam on your pattern. So I think that's a really cool little small feature. Let's see if you use that at all. Hello, Brad. How you doing? Thank you for last week. Joseph from Dallas, Texas. Funky Junkie, good to see you back. Miranda, hey son. David Dawson, Patrick from Poland. 1984 from Istanbul. Nice to see you guys. Excuse me. Hope you're doing fine. So that was the first small update for you guys. Yes, some other fixes. Then, as I mentioned, we talked with Brad last week, and we were talking about the GIF looper and all the other video packs he has on his site here, synthpaks.com. And also I mentioned this mute group track, or a mute group mute group track videopak. So this is a way for you to sequence mute groups from within the motion track on your synthesizer. So it's kind of a meta pack or control pack. Sorry for the. There we go. Yeah, this dude is a legend. I'm just curious who will do like the, what was the term? ISO, whatever. When you play like the Ableton Push, you have the layout. I forgot the name for that keyboard layout. Or like you do sliders and knobs as a video pack, so you can, oh, fancy. And this is on sale right now. So if you want to try it out, go to synthpaks.com. And as I also mentioned, home, he has this GIF looper template project. This is a free tool, and I think we had, let's see, we had Julian in the stream. Yeah, hey everyone. So Julian Sanchez, thank you for sharing your tool that you did here, the GIF looper generator. So this is a way to use the free tool that Brad did to be able to create your own GIFs or GIF project, and then using this tool here, you drop your own animated GIFs, and then if you do it, you'll get a download button here, and then you can use that together with the GIF looper. I think that's wonderful. And both Brad and Julian is in the stream, in the chat. So if you have some questions, feel free to. I mean, I'm offering your help, guys, but I'm sure you'll be happy to socialize in chat here. Okay, thank you so much. That was exciting news, I think. So let's get to it. This week's focus is we want to carry on where we left off from last week, with William taking us through building a video pack from scratch, basically. So I'm going to call it William. Ooh, that was a speedy pickup.
Hello.
Hello, William. Let's get you on the big screen. How are you?
Yeah, good. Good.
Perfect.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I have my tea now, and I'm the stress from setting all this up is slowly leaving my body. It's amazing to be here, guys, but it's always nerve-wracking to get out here. But I feel good having you at my side here. I'm gonna turn off my camera. And so, how you been, William?
Yeah, good.
Mm-hmm.
Relaxed.
Yeah, you're relaxed. That's good.
Yeah.
Let's get some of your vibes. I think, I mean, for those who weren't here last week, maybe you can say a few words about yourself. But other than that, I think we can just get started. So
yeah. So I'm at We1A or at William Gunning Official on Instagram, if anyone wants to add me on there.
There we go.
But yeah, I work with teenage engineering quite often, helping out with events, gigs, doing some sales, doing some OD11 repairs, and making video packs. So yeah, we're just gonna, I think, dive straight into Unity.
Let's do it. So I think you guys remember that we did this last week, and also this is episode 2. So we're gonna clip this and make a tutorial from these 2 videos. So make it very clear. But this is the live version. So welcome to join in.
Yeah. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with Unity at this point, but we're just gonna create a new project. So if you hit new, or I'm gonna hit this drop down and select 2018.2. And we're going to create a 3D project and name it, I guess, Pulse is what we're going to call it. So just create. And so now it's going to create us a nice new project. Import all of the basic assets. and get going.
I'm gonna see if I can position the screen here better so people can see even more.
Sure.
Let's see. I'll do this. I think we'll dim the chat for now, and then we'll take questions along the way and also after this session.
Yeah.
So there we
All right.
go.
So if everyone's created their Unity project, I think we're good to go. So what we're going to do is import our assets in. So I'm just going to right click, import package, and then select custom package. And then select videolab 1.1.1 because that's the latest version. And then hit import. And give it a sec.
I'll get rid of this. There we go.
How's everyone's week been?
Void Lux, welcome to the stream.
Okay, so it's imported all of my videolab assets. We're just going to create a videolab asset folder in our projects, just so that it doesn't get too crowded. So we're going to create folder and then name that videolab assets. And just select everything except for scenes. Except for scenes, and then drag that into videolab assets. There we go. Now we're just going to organize our hierarchy. So we're going to create a little folder for each of our objects. So we're going to go cameras, and drag and drop our main camera in. We're going to go create lights. So right click and then hit create empty. And then we're going to drag and drop our directional light in. And then we're going to create a third one just for our 3D assets. And then we can start to import some of our videopak stuff in. So if you right click, we're going to create our clack patch. It's going to come up with this little patch, and then right click again, and we're going to create MIDI jack, MIDI source. So this is what's going to bring MIDI into Unity. And now we can open up the patcher and drag it down. So there we go. Now let's have a look at creating some objects and setting things up to actually start making the project. So inside of our camera, what we're going to do is going to set the background to something slightly more interesting. So I've just got a little Chrome tab up here for us to get our colors from. So if you guys go to coolors.com, that's COOLORS, we can generate some colors. So just go coolors.co, start the generator, and we're just going to get a kind of light color for our background. So hit space to just randomize the colors until you find something interesting, quite like this one. So CFD6EA. So we're just going to copy that, go back into Unity, and then we can change from skybox to solid color on our camera. And so what this means is that instead of having that kind of gradient skybox, it's now going to have a color that we choose. So we're just going to go down here, paste in the hexadecimal, and we've got the color. Now we can start to import some 3D assets. So we're going to start off with a sphere. So if I right click inside of 3D assets, create 3D object, and then select sphere, it'll create a sphere inside of that game object. And now you can't really see the sphere because of the current positioning of the camera and the colors. So we're just going to move that down to where we can see it. So move this down to Y0, so it's on the same plane. Actually, for the time being, just so that we can see it, we're going to set it back to skybox. And then make sure that our sphere is visible. So just move this back here. There we go. So we'll set that perhaps to -5. Oh, that's why. Because I had accidentally set up the 3D assets as being in its own position. There we go, that's fixed. So now we can see the sphere in the center of the screen, -5 away. So now it's just centered there. We can change our color back to solid color, and we see the sphere currently lit on a plain background. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create a material for the sphere so that we can change its color to a solid color. So we're just going to right click here, create. We're just going to create a folder for the materials first of all. Let's create folder, materials, and then inside of that folder we're going to create a material. I'm going to call this sphere. And then you'll see here that we've got all of these different settings that we can change. But what we're going to do is head up to shader at the top and then select, instead of standard, we're going to go down to unlit and then color. And here you can see that we now have in this little preview section a blank white color. And so we're going to go back to Coolors and we're going to generate our next color. So I'm just going to hit lock here so that we don't lose it. And then, yeah, I like this blue. What do you think? Orange or blue, Toby?
Yeah, go with the baby blue.
Baby blue, okay. So just going to double click that, hit copy, and then paste it into our color. So now you'll see that in the little preview, it comes up with blue as the color.
And that's a handy tool for finding good color combinations. But of course you can use whatever value or whatever color you want.
Yeah, of course. Of course. There's the color wheel there that you can just select one from.
Yeah.
So we're just going to drag and drop the sphere onto the sphere, and now that changes color to baby blue. So now we've got a baby blue sphere on a light kind of almost light violet background. Okay, what next? So we can now create a cube. So we're going to have 2 objects in this project. So we're going to go again, 3D object, cube, put that inside of our 3D assets. And actually let's scale up our sphere to perhaps 2 by 2 by 2, and then our cube by 1.5, 1.5 and 1.5. So it's just coming off the edges. And now we can go ahead and create a material for the cube and select a color for it. So we're just going to do the same thing that we did before, create a material inside of our materials folder, call that cube, and then select our unlit shader. Now we can go back to Coolors, or if you want to come up with your own colors, go ahead. And I'm just going to choose this orange soda color because it looks kind of nice. And we're just going to paste that into our color. There we go. And now we can drag and drop that material onto our cube. And now we've got colors on all of our assets. So what we can start to do now is add the various nodes and patches and components to everything. So I'm just going to hit save to make sure that we don't lose any progress. This is really important. You want to make sure that you're constantly saving your projects just in case anything goes wrong.
That's a pro tip.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
That goes for all instruments, all applications, whatever. Make sure you save.
The most important thing you can do. I cannot tell you how many things I've lost because I forgot to save. So let's add a component here. So just select your sphere in the 3D assets and then add component. And we're just going to look up deformer. And that will come up with 2 options, generic or normal deformer. And what we're going to want to choose is generic deformer. This is going to move the points on our sphere about in a random way using certain types of noise. And we can change the settings on here and have a look at what that does. So if I just disable the cube for the time being so we can just see what's happening to the sphere when I press play, we can see what this component's doing. So you can see here that on hitting play, it's deforming the sphere's points using noise. And so we're going to play with this effect and change the speed of it to allow us on a kick drum or a snare drum to move the object and make it warp more or less. So that's currently what it's doing. And so we're just going to change a few of these settings so that it's less extreme, but also just as cool. So what we're going to do is set the noise speed to 0.05. We're going to, yeah, that's it. That's all we need to change for now. So just set your noise speed to 0.05 and we can just see what that changes from what we had before. But you can see that it's moving significantly slower than it was before. And so what that means is that you don't get that kind of crazy movement when you're not inputting a note just yet. So once that's done, we can go into our patcher. And just in case you don't know where to find it, go to your patch and then open patcher, and that'll bring it up. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create a note input. So right click, hit create, and then input, MIDI, and note input. And so what this allows us to do is to take a note from our OPZ and use that to control any number of parameters inside of Unity. So what we're going to do is we're going to set it up to receive input from a specific channel. And now, because of the way that we're going to do this project, which is that when a kick drum plays, it moves our sphere, and when a snare drum plays, it moves our cube, we're going to set the MIDI channel on the first note input for our sphere to 1. And we're not going to have the note filter turned on because we don't really need it. We're just looking for any kick drum sound played on channel 1. It will move the sphere. So now it's listening for any input from channel 1. And now we can right click, create, and we're going to go to animation and select float animation. And what this allows us to do is over a period of time, draw a curve and animate the movement of a parameter. So it's like automation in Logic or any DAW. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a curve. So I've got some preset curves here. And you can just hit this S curve, and then we can right click, edit key, and then select our value. So we're going to start off with a value of, we'll say 1 for now, at time 0. So it's going to start off, and it'll look flat for now, but once we change this second parameter, it'll move down to being another value. So we're going to set this second value back down to what we had originally set it to. So we change the value to 0.05. So now when we press a note, and we're going to connect these notes, but the idea is that when we press a note, it will go straight up to speed 1, and then down slowly, or over the course of a second, to speed 0.05, where we have it set normally. So we can close this.
What will you be assigning the speed to?
So the speed is what we're going to be using with the float animation. Yeah. So the speed will go up to 1 and then back down to 0.5. So we'll have kind of like it speeding up and then slowing down and almost dancing on a note. So we can drag and drop note on to play. And now, obviously, we've got to get this from a note input and a float animation out to our output. So we're going to go float out. So we're going to create, output, generic, and then float out. So what this is going to do is allow us to take our note input, pass it through something that will create a variable parameter, and then patch it into one of our parameters on the component that's on the sphere. So we can now click on the float out, drag and drop sphere onto the target menu, and then select generic deformer and go down to property and choose noise speed. So now when we press a note, it'll run this animation, and then that animation will pass through to the noise speed. So we can see what this looks like by just hitting play, and then selecting our kick channel on the OPZ, and just pressing a note. So we can see here, and I'll turn up the volume so you guys can hear it. Whenever I press a note, it's moving it. So perhaps it's a bit too long at the moment. What we can do is we can change the actual speed that it's playing it back at. So if I unplay, sorry, and then change the speed to 2, now it will run that twice as fast, and it'll take half a second to go from 1 all the way down to our normal value. So now that's, I think, slightly more manageable, and we'll use that for the time being. So now it dances when we press play. So that's the super basic patch that we're going to do for the sphere. And now we can move on to the same, essentially the same patch, but for our cube. So you can go back to our cube, turn it back on so we can see it again. We're just going to add the same component. So generic deformer, then we're going to set our noise speed, and we are going to set that to the same value, so 0.05. So now if I hit play, you should see that both of them are moving at a similar rate. Obviously, because they're different shapes, they're moving in different ways. So I can now go back to my cube. We can create a note input. So right-click, create, input, MIDI, note input. We're going to essentially create the exact same thing, except this time we're going to set it to channel 2. So it's only listening for the snare drum. And we're going to right-click again, create, animation, float animation, note on to play. Gonna create our curve, and you can actually save the curve if you want to. So if I were to go back to the float animation, this kind of saves time. You can actually create a new preset and save it there. So that way I can go down to the float animations and select that preset should I wish to. But for tutorial's sake, I'm going to create it again. So I'm going to set the value to 1. And it looks like my time's slightly messed up there, so we're just going to set that back to 0. And then on this one, we're going to set the value down to 0.05. And there we go. We've got our curve. Set the speed to 2 again. And we might want to make it move slightly faster on the snare drum because it's a bit more of a percussive hit. So we can do that in a minute. But for the time being, we're just going to create our float out again. So output, generic, float out, drag and drop. And then in our float out component, I'm going to drag our cube onto the target and select generic deformer. Hit noise speed, and now we can test that it's working. If you go to your snare track on the OPZ or whatever you've got for channel 2, and hit a note, you can see that now the cube moves. And on hitting a kick drum, the sphere moves. So if I play my project, it now moves. So this is the basic premise of the project, and it's going to revolve around these 2 patches. But I'm just going to speed up the snare because I think it's a bit too slow, so I'm going to set that to 3. So it's now moving at 1/3 of a second for that animation, so we can just test what that looks like. It's a bit faster. Cool. Okay. So that's most of your patching done in terms of what's actually going to be affected by the OPZ visually, not effects, but changing various components for the sphere and the cube. So again, we're going to save that, make sure that it's all ready to go for our next section. Okay, so let's look at some effects. So if I come into our cameras, we can collapse this back, go into our cameras, expand it, select main camera, and we're just going to start to add some components. So the first component we're going to add is bloom. So if I delete my search, you can actually go in and find the effects yourself. So there's image effects, Kino image effects, and then there's Kvant's got some interesting ones. These are really more kind of generating things rather than visual effects for the camera. So there's a few pages of it on the wiki, but I'm sure there's more to come, and I might cover it in some later stuff that I do. But there's also some other effects down here in scripts. But for now, what we're going to do... Oh, accidentally added a component there.
Well, you have chat in the background or next to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Is there a question you want me to have a look
at? This is just some praise for you. So keep going.
Oh, thanks, guys. So we're just going to select Keynote Image Effects and then Bloom. And so you'll see here that it's massively over bloomed. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn down the intensity, perhaps try 0.2 for now. Bring it up to something that's slightly less intense. We can turn down our radius and down our softening. And now we've got a slight bloom to our project. So if I turn it off and on, you can see this very, very slight difference. And if I press play, you can actually kind of see it in action doing its thing. So you can see that it gives it a sort of soft fuzz to the edges of the objects. And if we had lit shaders on our objects, it would be far more obvious as an effect, but I kind of like the subtlety in this project. And so what we can do now is we can start to patch that in as an effect that we can control. So if you come into our patcher, we're just going to scroll to the side, right click, create, input, and then for the bloom, what we can actually do is we can select either a note input to have it, or a knob input, or we can do both. So in this project, I'm going to have it doing both, so we can control both how intense it is and also when we want it to be on or off. So I'm just going to create a note input, and then with this one, we do actually want to have the note filter on. So we're going to go channel 16, so this is going to be our videolab channel, and then note name. So it can get quite complex if you're using the note number, but it does allow you to assign each effect to each of the specific notes on the videolab channel. But for simplicity's sake, today we're just going to use note name.
So basically the black and white keys on the OPZ.
Yeah. Exactly.
So if you want to have a specific effect, you specify exactly which effect goes where. Exactly.
And with the note number, you can choose exactly what note it's using, as opposed to just saying, you know, C sharp or D sharp.
Yep.
So, excuse me. So, we're just going to select, yes, skull, right?
Absolutely.
But we're just going to select, for the time being, I think, F as our note.
Yep.
And so now, on channel 16, when we press F, it'll trigger the component. And so now we actually need to patch it. So we're going to go note input, and then we're going to create, let's have a look. Just looking at my notes here. So we're going to create a note input, then we're going to create an output to generic float out. Then we're going to drag our main camera onto the component there, and then select bloom. You can see that we've got all of these different controls. So we're just going to select intensity, and actually, sorry, excuse me, this is for the knob. So just create, output, and then we're going to look for active status out. So that's in component, active status out. So what this is going to do is, upon a note being pressed, it's going to turn on or turn off our component. So to do that, we're going to create a toggle. So if you right click again here, create, switching, and then toggle. So now drag and drop note on to trigger, and then on to enable, and off to disable. And then select off event on startup, because otherwise the moment that you start up your project, all of the effects that we've created will be turned on, and we don't want that. So we're just going to go note input, make sure that we've got everything in its right place here. On the toggle, we're going to make sure that we've got our off value set to 0, our on value set to 1, then our active status out. We can drag and drop our game object, or actually we can select our component. So we're just going to drag and drop main camera to component, select bloom, and now upon pressing the F key, either of the F keys on our channel 16 videolab track, whilst the project is running, it will trigger on or off the bloom effect. So now you can see that slight change because we've got the bloom set very low at the moment. But not sure if you can see that, but it's just turning it off and on as I press the F key. So we can drag this across here so we can create space for our knob inputs. So here we've got a little bit of space. We can right click, create, input, MIDI, knob input, and then select our channel. We're going to go channel 16. We're going to set knob number 1, so our green knob on the OPZ, to control our bloom amount. And so now we can right click, create, and then output, component, generic, float out. Then we can drag and drop our camera onto it, select bloom, and then intensity. And now if we were to just patch the knob input to the float out, we wouldn't get very fine control of how much we want the knob to affect, and a whole series of different controls. So what we're going to do is we're going to create what's called a float filter. So if we go down to create, filter, and then float filter, we can patch value to input, output to input, and now we have more fine control using this filter, which allows us to select the amplitude, so how much we want it to affect, and the bias, so at what point it starts. So here we're going to select an amplitude of, I think 1 should do, and a bias of perhaps 0.2. So the lowest it will go is 0.2, so you can still see the effect, but it's not quite as intense. And we can have a look at what this is doing by just saving, very important, and then hitting play. And now, if I turn knob 1 and hit F, you can see that as I turn the knob, it brings up the intensity. So that's all we've done is we've set the F key to turn off and on the effect, and the first knob to control the intensity. There we go. Okay, so now we've done with our bloom track, our bloom channel. You could even set it to control multiple different nodes here. So if you wanted to, you could create another float output, generic float out, and then again patch the output to the input, drag and drop your main camera, and we can have it so that it controls not just the intensity but perhaps even the radius, and then it will send the same amplitude and bias to both of those controls. So you can get a slightly more intense effect, but I don't really go with that because it can cause all sorts of issues. So for the time being, I think it's best to just go with one patch. Okay, so that's the bloom setup. Now we can add our next component. So the next component we're going to add is a vignette. So if we just look up, same as we did with bloom, VIG, vignette. Just comes up there, hit enter, and it will bring up a vignette. And at the moment it's a bit intense. So we're just going to bring down the fall off to a point where it looks just contoured, but not too intense. So I think perhaps about 0.2. That should do. And then hit save. And now what we're going to want to do is you can either have the vignette on by default, or you can have it controllable. So just for demonstration's sake, I'm going to create another one of these patches for our vignette. So we'll right click, create, input, MIDI, note input. And then we're going to set up essentially the same controls for this. So set our channel to 16, put our note filter to note name. And in this one, we're actually going to select G. So I know, pretty shocking. But we're just going to set it to F for the bloom, G for our vignette. And then we can create a toggle again, so to toggle it on or off each time we press the button. And that's under switching and then toggle. Okay, then drag our note on to trigger and then create an active status out. So create, output, component, active status out. There we go. And then drag on to enable, off to disable. There we go. And now we can select our main camera. Select our main camera. Choose the component, so Vignette. And now, upon pressing the G key, any one of the G keys on channel 16, so the Videolab channel on our ep6, it will toggle on and off the vignette. So again, we're going to set that to off event on startup so that we've got a blank canvas the moment we start. And now you can see that as I press the button, it turns on the vignette. Same goes for the bloom. We maintain that control, but we now have a vignette on top of that. There we go. So what we're going to do is go back to here, and actually I forgot to turn these off when I made them, but because we're turning them off on startup, it's good practice to have them off by default. So we're turning those off, and then we can move on to our next component. So the next component we're going to add is the Degrade. So if we add component, delete here, and then just search DEG Degrade. And so again, all these components can actually be found in these folders. The Degrade component, I believe, is found inside of scripts. And I think, yeah, there we go. It's, I suspect, one of these. And so you can find all of these effects in the different folders. Yeah, there we go. Sorry, image effects.
But what's the best way? What's the best way to familiarize with all the effects?
Yeah, I think it's nice when you get started to have a look through these different folders and find the effects and have a play about with them, because it's a nice way of exploring new image effects and components. But for speed's sake, I think you can just search them up and they'll come up. But if anyone wants to find it inside of the folder, it's image effects and then Degrade. And so now we've got this component that's been added, which allows us to control the resolution and the bit depth of the colors on our screen. So if I turn down the resolution, you can see what happens. So as I pull it down, it goes more and more low resolution. So same goes for our color bits. So you're going to lose a bit of information each time you drag the knob down. So this can be quite nice for certain effects. I created a kind of 80s vaporwave mountain kind of panning video pack that I extensively use the Degrade component with. So it's really great for certain types of projects, but for this one we're just going to use the resolution. So we're going to have on each of the black keys from F sharp to A sharp, controlling our resolution. So we're going to keep that on, because with the resolution we're just going to change this value down. I find that that's the best way of controlling it. So what we can do now is we can create a note input, and the way that I'm ordering it here is that we're going to have our white keys on the left and then our black keys on the right here, so that it's in the same structure as the keyboard, so that if you're going, oh, I want to find, F, the F note, you don't have to search through each of the components to find which one's being controlled by the F key. You just go to the first one, and then same for the G key, and etc. So we're just going to right click, create, input, MIDI, note input. And we're going to drag that there just in between these two. Select our channel again, so channel 16. Note name, and this time we're going to choose F sharp. And so now in terms of patching, what we're going to do is we're going to create another one of those float filters that we had for the knob input. So again, this allows us to choose what value is going to a float. So to one of these sliders, or so if I go back to our components, to one of these sliders, or one of these inputs. And you'll find that different inputs have different values, and that's just how they've been coded inside of the component. And so for the degrade, these are both floats. So what we're going to do is we're going to create, and as we did earlier, create a float filter, and then a float output. So create, output, generic, and then float out, and then patch them together. Now what we can start to do is we can set what actual amplitude we want to have on the float filter. So we're going to set that amplitude to 8 for this first one. So now when we hit the key, it'll send a value of 8 to, and we're just going to assign that now. So again, drag and drop our main camera into the target, select the degrade component. Oh, it seems I've messed up here. So just bear with me a second. So,
William,
yeah,
how taxing is Unity on a computer? Does one need a super fancy computer for like doing stuff like you're doing now?
Yeah, so I've got quite a beefy computer at the moment, but before this, I had a computer that didn't actually have a dedicated graphics card.
Right.
And it taxed the computer quite a lot. So I tend to quit intensive applications like Google Chrome, but I find that having unintensive stuff running in the background shouldn't affect it much. But yeah, ideally you want to have as good of a graphics card as you can get. But, you know, for most of the stuff that you're doing, Videolab's quite basic a lot of the times. So you can create most projects without a super beefy CPU.
Cool.
I'm currently using the MacBook Pro 16-inch, if anyone's wondering. And it's working amazingly well. So let's figure out what value we need to patch out to. So if we go generic, just going to try and figure out exactly what we're patching to. So let's have a look at integer out. So again, with Videolab, as we said last time, it's all about trial and error. So you may not get it the first time, but eventually, as you can see here, you'll figure it out and you'll find where you need to patch to. So that may not be immediately obvious, you know, try things out, see what you can come up with, and you might actually be surprised by what you can find and what you can create. So let's have a look. So let's press play, and if I go to my main camera component, drag the resolution down, so maybe to 4, just to test, and then hit the F# key, you can see that it brings the resolution back up. So down here, you can see that when I press the F# key, it brings it back up to 8. So we can see there that our patch is working, and we can continue with the rest of the note inputs. So just unplay it. We're going to save again, just continuously saving to make sure that we don't lose anything. So I'm just going to create this exact same patch. So again, create input, MIDI, note input. And then this time, same channel, same note filter, but we're going to select G#. And for the next one, obviously A#. Same float filter. And then the same integer out. And you can duplicate this, but just for the tutorial's sake, I'm going through and creating each one so that it gives people time to do the same for them. We're going to set the amplitude this time, perhaps to 6. We can trial and error this, see what looks best. But for the time being, I'm just going to set it to 6, and then make sure that we've assigned our integer out to the component. Select degrade, and then resolution. And then we're going to do the same again for the A#. Create our float filter, and create our integer out. Patch them all together, and make sure that we've got everything set up as we wanted to. And then we're going to set the amplitude on this one, perhaps to 4. So we've got 3 quite extreme settings for what we want it to look like. And again, integer out, make sure that we've actually put a target to our integer out. There we go. Resolution bits. And now when I press play, we can select between our 3 different resolutions. So I'm not quite happy with how the 6 looks. I think it looks a bit jaggedy. So I think I might go to 5 instead. So let's go to our float filter, select 5, and have a look at what that looks like. Yeah, there we go. I think that's cooler. So now you've got 3 different resolutions that you can choose between from the black keys between F# and A#. There we go. And then again, we've got our vignette and our bloom, and we can control the bloom intensity. Awesome. Okay. Now that we've patched that, we can move on to our next component. So if we go back to our main camera, make sure we've saved, always important, and start to add our next component. So the next component we're going to create is the tube component. Now this one's slightly hidden because it's not in our image effects and it's not in our Keynote image effects, and these are most of the effects that you're going to use. But it's actually going to be found inside of our scripts. So if you come down through to scripts and then Keynote, and again you can just search this, but I want to show you where it is so that you guys can get familiar with it. You can select tube, and so now you can see that it applies this slightly terrifying vintage effect, as though you're watching The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air filmed on tape. So down in our tube component, we can change the varying levels of bleed, fringing, and the scan lines. So we're just going to turn off our scan lines to get this nice bleeding and fringing effect. So we're going to turn up our fringing and we're going to turn up our bleeding. Not too much, but tune it to your taste. It's really about creating a video pack that you think looks good and is set up in a way that you think you can, in a way that you think looks best. So we'll just play it and we'll play about with these different values. And what you need to remember is that when you're in the play mode, it's always important to unplay, not pause, but to press play again, because otherwise it won't save anything that you've done, because this is almost like a debug mode. So we can change these parameters, but you'll see that once we go back, it'll put it back to how it was before. So it can be kind of cool to have the bleeding all the way down and the fringing all the way up. Maybe that's how you want to do it, and you can get these magenta and green lines on the edge. But I'm just going to bring the bleeding up to a point where it seems interesting and have our fringing up. I think that looks good. So it's about 0.6 and 1. And now if I press play, just look at this bottom corner and you'll see that it reverts back to the value it was at before. So if I go back to the main camera, you can see there it's not actually saved that value because we were in that play mode. So we just need to set that to 0.6 where we had it before, and now we've got those two values set. So we're going to do the exact same patch that we did before with a note input, a toggle, and an active status out. So when we press the key, it will enable or disable the effect. So we're going to create a note input, and we're going to set that, continuing our white keys, to A. So we're going to go channel, 16, note filter, note name, and then A. And then same goes for the toggle, so create, switching, toggle, and then an active status out. Output, component, active status out. And now on note on, it will trigger the effect. So we just need to make sure that we've patched everything. So again, drag our main camera over to the target component, and then select tube. Then on the toggle, make sure that we've got everything set up properly, off event on startup, because we don't want to have all of our effects at once. So again, turning it off on the camera. Make sure that you've got your degrade turned on, because again, here with the degrade, we've not set it to toggle the effect, we're just changing a value on it. And now if I hit play, we can test that everything's working as it should be. So now we've got our first 2 effects. Let's test our third. There we go. So on pressing A, it now turns on or off the effect using a toggle. We can also change our resolution and have that go on top. There we go. So that's working. We can move on to our next effect. Let's have a look at some questions real quick. So
one thing that I found interesting here now is Funky Junkie. Will it be possible to send CC MIDI data from LFO gyro motion knob?
yeah.
That's so you can shake your unit and affect the video pack, basically.
Yeah, so that's totally possible. Thankfully, it was added with the possibility of using the gyroscope in OPZ a few updates ago. So as long as on a track you have that affecting a certain parameter, so say I were to go onto the lead track and have the gyroscope affecting parameter 1, you can then set it up so that parameter 1 on that track then sends to, you know, an object size or the speed of something in Unity, as long as it's sending from parameter 1, so the knob that parameter 1 is set up to be, yeah, you can get full control of that using the gyroscope. There is a gyroscope option inside of the patcher. So if I go input, gyro input, there is a possibility to do that. But for the time being, I don't think it's been set up for the OPZ. So because this is created by Keiichiro Takahashi as a toolkit for essentially, you know, any crazy devices that have MIDI and controllers and all this sort of stuff, there are the options to create patches and components that do that sort of stuff. But unless you've got something that's generating that, it's not going to do anything. So
and currently it's not implemented for the OPC, but
yeah,
hopefully it's something we could make work in the future.
Of course. And again, because videopak is something that's being constantly iterated on and changed and added to, it'll come there eventually. So I'm fairly confident that that patch will be available pretty soon. But for the time being, you'll have to do that inside of your OPZ. Okay, so moving on. What we can do now is create our next effect. So the next effect I'm going to create is, let's have a look, data mosh. So data mosh is sort of like a glitch effect. I think a few other videopak makers have used it in their projects, but it's this cool kind of glitching effect where it pulls the objects along with what's happening on the screen. So I'll show you what that looks like in a moment, but it can be found in scripts, or at least I think it can, in scripts, Kino, yeah, there we go, scripts, Kino, and data mosh. Again, alternatively, you can just search data mosh and it'll come up. But for those who want to manually find it, that's scripts, Kino, and data mosh. And so now I'll add that component to our project. So we can select the block size, and we'll play about with the different controls on this in a moment. But if you just hit play, we can experiment and see what we can come up with. So if you hit this glitch button, you'll see that it suddenly freezes, and then it'll start to do various little things. And at this current setting, it'll basically just freeze because it's not really moving about that much. And you can actually see our camera preview shows things without effects. But let's just clear that, and it'll bring it back to a blank canvas. So perhaps we can bring up our entropy and see what happens. So if I hit glitch with our entropy up, still not much is happening. So we're going to play about with these controls and see what we can come up with. But the ones that I've found work really well for this specific project is if we set our block size to 1, so the smallest value we can get it to, almost like little grains, and then have a look. So glitch, see what effect that has. Again, this isn't a really great project to demonstrate the data mosh in its full capacity, so maybe I can demonstrate those on my own live streams. But let's have a look at what we can change. So we can set the block size to 1. Our entropy will go quite low, probably about 3. I think 2.8 works quite nice. So let's see what happens now. Yeah, there we go. So we can start to see that it's bleeding through just about. And so this will give you a sense more of what data mosh is doing. So we can clear that again and glitch. And it'll take a moment to kind of set into effect. And I think that's quite nice as an effect. There we go. Then clear it. So we're going to set this up to data Mosh when we press a button. So we'll just unplay it, create a note input. So MIDI, note input, then we can start patching things. So in our main camera, just make sure that you've got your data Mosh set to the right parameters. So we'll set this to 1 and then 0.28. These are all just settings that I think work really nicely. Obviously you can play about with this and see what works for you, but I'm just going to set these values to 1, 0.28, 4, and then velocity scale to 2, and then the diffusion to 0.36. So these are just settings that I find work really nicely, but again, can just play about with it and see what comes up. See what you think works nicely is really the idea here. So we're going to drag this note input over to where we've got our black keys, because this is going to sit on C#. So we can pull this down to its own separate little section so that we've almost got a keyboard going. And then we can start to patch. So we're going to have 2 events out to send to our glitch and to our reset. So we're going to go note input, and then we're going to create input output, and then we're going to go to generic, and then event out. So we're going to create 2 of these. And for those of you wondering, to duplicate things, you can select however many nodes you want. And if you can't be bothered or just don't want to go through each of the menus every time and find it, you just right-click it and then duplicate. And I found that in earlier versions of Unity and Videolab, this doesn't work so well, and occasionally you might get glitches, which is why I tend to just select each one individually. But it's slightly more stable now, so it's not too bad practice. So let's have a look at how we can patch this. Yeah, exactly. It's a big time saver. Yeah, exactly. It's a big time saver, but it can occasionally glitch out. So what we're going to do here is we don't actually need to patch anything in between these, because we're just going to say, when I press the note on, I want it to, when I'm holding down the note, I want it to glitch, and the moment I let go, I want it to reset. You can have a toggle in between these if you want to toggle that, but for the way that I like to have the glitch in this project specifically, when I press the note on and hold it, I want it to glitch, and when I let go, I want it to release. So we're just going to drag on note on to the bang input, and the note off to the event out, bang input. There we go. And now we just need to set up this so that it's actually sending something out, because at the moment it's not really doing anything. So if we click on our event out, we can add on the list, and then we're just going to drag and drop our main camera into the object. And now we can select our function. So we go click on the no function, go down to data Mosh, and then select glitch. So now once you press note on, it will trigger the event out, which will trigger the glitch. We're going to do the same for the event out, but the second event out, but for reset. So again, drag and drop our main camera, click on the no function, go down, select reset. And now when we press down, it'll glitch. When we let go, it'll reset. So it's effectively pressing those 2 buttons that we had earlier, these 2 here. So I'm going to save. I forgot to set the note input as a value, so we're going to go back there, select the channel, so channel 16, select our note filter, and we're just going to go C#. So now we can test it, save, play, and test. So now if I hit C#, oh, I'm not on the Videolab channel. If I hit C#, you can see it freezes momentarily, and then it creates this nice little grain, the data Mosh. So now we can try it out with some effects. And now you can see there that it's starting to add kind of some cool creative effects. Okay, so that's our data Mosh. And now we can move on to our next effect. So if anyone has any questions regarding that, now's the time to ask. Can you create a toggle in Unity that will interact with something on the ep6? Absolutely. So you can have, because these are all nodes, essentially is as long as you've got an input of some sort, creating a value, and an output for where you want it to go. So there's actually MIDI outs in this. So for those people who are wanting to create video labs that control the OPZ, you can create outputs to MIDI. So you can send to a knob value or a note value, and you can also, send to various other things. So you can have it so that when you press a note on the OPZ, it then controls a whole series of other things, including, playing a note or playing a sequence of notes, or, creating an LFO using the float animation and looping that. Those sorts of things can all be done. And I might be able to go into those in more depth. You can message me on Instagram if anyone has any questions, after the live stream. Feel free. But you can do all sorts of crazy stuff. So yes, you can use a toggle to control something on the OPZ. Bolt asks, didn't someone recreate the Tombola sequencer in Unity for the OPZ? Can't find that anywhere. I haven't seen it, but it's definitely possible. And I can probably do a video or a live stream where I show off how to create that, if people are interested. Can you import small videos into the scenes? So Unity does allow for this. It's kind of complicated, which is why I haven't really done it, but it's definitely possible. I won't show you today how to do this, but yes, you can. Brad the designer says, I use toggles for the mute groups. Track videopak toggles the mute group on and off. Yeah, exactly. So an example of how you can use toggles. Okay, moving on to our next effect. So if I go to the main camera, we're going to add our next effect. So we're going to add vision. So what vision is, and I'll show you in a moment, but it's essentially going to use a series of different informations that our camera picks up. So depth, normals from objects. It's going to map those out as a visual display of what that is. And so you can find vision inside of, I think it's Keynote Image Effects. Yeah, there we go. So Keynote Image Effects, vision. And so once we add that, you'll see that it's kind of this very foggy looking effect. And that's because it's currently set to depth. So we're just going to change that to normals. And now you'll see that it adds this kind of vintage, kind of 90s looking effect. You can actually have a look at what each of these are. So if I set it to motion vectors, you'll see that it looks essentially the same, but we can actually press play and see what it's doing. Vision's actually a really, really cool component that can be used very creatively, but it essentially allows you to see, and I don't think this one's a great project to show it off on, because it doesn't really move about much, but it will map out various different movements in your project. So you can use the motion vectors one, and I have used that in projects before, but for this one it's not really great. And same goes for number values, but again, not really a great one for this project. So we're just going to set it to normals. We're going to make sure that we've got all of this stuff set as it is, because I think it looks really nice. You can bring it up to increase the intensity or bring it down, up to you. I mean, again, it's all about creating your video pack, not my video pack. It's creating something that you're happy with and you think looks cool. But I'm just going to keep this at 0.5 for simplicity's sake. Okay, so now let's patch this up to create something. So we can actually use the duplicate function if we want to. So I'm just going to do that for this one. Hit duplicate, and then it's going to create a duplicate of what we had before. So again, because we're going for that kind of piano roll look, we're going to keep up the 1, 2, 3, 4. And then on the next one, we're going to have 3 continuing notes. So in the note input, we're going to set it to B. So on the B note, it's going to toggle that effect. So we can go to our active status out, and then instead of tube, select vision. Very simple. Make sure that it's set to off event on startup. And again, you can create these as you're going if you want, but I just thought I'd show you guys how the duplicate works for multiple components. Then we're going to go down here and disable vision as standard. Hit play. And now, on pressing the B, it toggles vision. So now we can add all of our effects in, we can start to play about with seeing what happens. And you'll see that there's this kind of like funny overlaying happening with Vision and the Degrade. And that's because we haven't ordered our components yet. So I'm just adding these in as the effects are, as I see them as being interesting to show off. And we're actually going to reorder the structure of those so that we get a kind of nicer looking final result where everything works better together and the Degrade overlays the Vision rather than the other way around, so that you get those nice jagged edges.
It's starting to look really good, William.
Yeah, it's getting there for sure.
I'm just gonna pause you a bit, technically here with time. How much longer do you want to keep going here?
I think probably 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Should do it.
Yeah, perfect.
If you're happy to continue for that amount of time.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Can you show something on shader toys at some point, William? Yes. Originally, this project was going to be a shader toy project, but I wasn't happy with how it was working with the latest version of Unity. So for compatibility's sake, I've done this this kind of more basic project. But yes, I can try and show you guys some shader toy examples if you'd like. So we're going to add our next effect, add component, and we're now going to look for, let's have a look, perhaps ramp, I think is the next one to come. So we're going to go into Keynote Image Effects, going to go down to ramp and select it. So now you can see that it creates this sort of subtle gradient from the top to bottom of these two colors. And we can actually choose what colors we want, and maybe it's another point where we can use Coolors for this. So perhaps go to your browser, open up Coolors, make sure that you've locked the colors that you like, and we're just going to generate two colors that we can go between. I really like this yellow, so let's lock that there. And perhaps, I don't know, oh, a purple could be interesting. Okay, that'll be very contrasting. So we're just going to copy our yellow, and I think, let's go bottom yellow. So let's paste in that hexadecimal. Oh, actually, that's really nice with the red. What do you guys think? Red or purple? Let's try it with the purple, and then if it's not as cool, then we can move back to the red. Let's have a look. It's kind of like a sunset gradient there. Yeah, I think the red looked cooler. Let's go for red. I think red looks cool. Okay, so now we've got this kind of like gradient across the top and bottom with this ramp component. So we can select the angle that we want it to go at. So we can have it come from the side. And I think I might just go from maybe bottom left to top right, yellow to purple. I think looks kind of cool. And we can change the opacity slightly so it's not so intense. Or you can go full whack, up to you guys. And again, all of these parameters are adjustable inside of the patcher. It's up to you how you want to patch things. I'm just giving you like a basic project to work off. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing with this chain, and I'm not going to duplicate it this time, just so that people who've recently joined kind of get it drilled into them what the patching is for this sort of arrangement. So again, it's a note input, it's a toggle, and then it's an active status out. So output, component, active status out. And then we just want to connect all of our nodes. Make sure that we've selected the component, ramp, and then off event on startup, and set up our node input. And then we'll set that to, C. This is going to be an effect that runs on our C node. Yeah, that looks good to me. Make sure you've hit save, disabled ramp by default, and then hit play. And now, when I hit the C key on my OPZ, it puts on the overlay. So now we can have all of these different effects running at the same time. We can add some bloom, change our resolution. Again, it doesn't look great at the moment. We'll fix that in a minute, don't worry. So that's the next effect done. And I'm just going to drag these up for kind of neatness sake. and move this down so that it looks a bit more like a keyboard. Okay, let's look at adding our last couple of effects. So in my project, I've just set out a few effects that you can use, and the next one's going to be mirror. And I've not actually set anything to the D and the E keys for this example. I thought you guys could go out, find a couple more effects in the different menus, and see what you guys like. Find something that's interesting to you, that you think looks cool with the project, and send me them on Instagram because I really want to see them and see how it comes out. So let's just add the final effect, which is mirror. So we can go to image effects, look for the mirror, might be in Kino. Yeah, there we go. Kino image effects and mirror. So if we select that, we've now got access to all of these different controls. So we're just going to set up on a key how to turn on and off the effect, and on a knob to control the number of repeats. So we're going to set the default repeats to, I think, 2 or 3. I think 2 is probably, no, 3 is the best way to go. And you can actually offset and roll them. So the point at which it's taking that chunk and the point at which it's rolling, so physically rotating the camera, essentially. So if I were to offset it by 45 degrees, you can see that it's moving that point of kind of like moving the kaleidoscope, essentially. And then roll, same goes, but for the actual physical camera. So we'll just set that to 0, 0 for now. And you can turn on symmetry as well if you want to have it symmetrically do the repeats. I think that's actually kind of a cool effect, so I might set it up to do the symmetry. So we'll set basic repeat to 3, symmetry on, and leave everything as it is. Again, customize it as you like. This is just my preferences. And now we're going to create one of these toggles, but we're just going to set it up on our D# key, because I think that's kind of like a nice place to put it as an effect. Because the way I like to do things is to have the overlays on the black keys and the kind of video effects on the white keys. I think that's a nice distinction to have. So let's create an input, MIDI, note input. We'll set it up for C#, so select channel 16, note name, sorry, D#, and then select the key. And then we're going to create a toggle, switching toggle, select a trigger, and then we'll put an active status out. There we go. So now, again, when I press the D# key, it'll turn off or on the mirror effect. Very, very simple. And we'll set the toggle so that it's off on startup. And then turn it off here. Drag and drop our main camera onto the component. Mirror. There we go. So now, when I press the key, it'll turn it on. There we go. Very simple. So we get this kind of like interesting kaleidoscopic pulsing effect. I think it looks kind of cool. Okay, so now onto controlling how many times it repeats. So we're going to use that similar kind of setup that we had here, except this time we're going to have it with the mirror. So let's have a look at how we're patching it. So we're going to want to have essentially the same patch, except we're going to use an integer out, so int out. An integer is just a whole number. So we'll just go knob input, so input, MIDI, knob input. Again, back in our knobs section, you don't want to confuse things too much. You don't want to have a cluster of knobs, because otherwise it gets quite complicated and confusing quite quickly. And then we're going to create a float filter. So this will, again, allow us to choose the amplitude and the point at which it starts, so like the minimum value that it has to follow. So we're going to set the bias to 3, and the amplitude we could set to maybe 7, so it'll go from 3 up to 10 repeats. And then on to input, and then we obviously need to set it out. So create, output, and then generic, integer out. So output to input, integer out, we're going to drag and drop our main camera into the component, and then we're going to select what we want to affect. So mirror and then repeat. And now on moving, a knob that we're about to assign. So channel 16, knob 2. It will change the number of repeats in our project on the mirror. So if I press play, add the mirror component, and now turn knob 2, you should see, for some reason it's not doing it, so we'll just debug this in a second, but you can see that there's now more repeats. Let's have a look at why it's not working properly. So again, it's all about trial and error and just figuring out what's happening, how to fix it, and working it out for yourself, really. So maybe we can try with a bias of 2 and see what happens. It might not like the way that I've got it set up, and that's fine. It's just about working with the program and figuring out what's wrong. So let's try setting this to 0 and seeing what happens. It might just be to do with how I've got it set up. Let's take some questions whilst I figure it out. So, can this be done in Unreal Engine? Unfortunately not. I'm sure there's some sort of API that has been created for Unreal Engine to do this sort of stuff, but in terms of creating it in Unreal Engine and then exporting it to over to the ep6 app, that's not possible. So that can't be done for the time being, and I don't think there's any plans to do it. Then let's have a look. Dare I say this, but similar program language? I'm not too sure. I've not used Unreal Engine. Tony Gracie says, can you show a quick example of when/why to use the bang node? Potentially. I mean, I don't really use it in many of my projects, mainly because I don't really I don't really use it for much, and I don't want to overcomplicate things in this project, but maybe it's something that we can explore in further tutorials. But let's have a look. I think it might be this symmetry that's doing it. So let's try turning that off and seeing what happens. Float filter, amplitude, bias 3. See what happens. Again, it's still a work in progress, so some things may take a while to get them
It
properly
still looks great, so
behaving.
Will you also be showing how to export this?
Yeah. That's super quick. It shouldn't take more than like 2 to 5 minutes, depending on the speed of your computer and how quickly it can compile things, really. All right, let's set this to 3 because that might be doing it. Apologies for this, guys. I created a practice project and it all seemed to have gone well, but yeah. All right, for the time being, we won't set the repeats as a knob input. I might go over this. Oh, that's why, because I got it on. Apologies, that's a really dumb mistake. Okay, we'll go value.
That's a great one.
Silly. That's a classic mistake. All right, we'll set the repeats and try that again. Take 2. Let's see if this works now. Set that there. Oh yeah, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so it's working now. You just want to have it actually sending the value and not the on, because of course it is. There is a function for the on. I never use it with the knobs, but if you want to activate something the moment you touch the knob, that's how to do it. I don't really use that for much though. But now we've got this kind of like cool kaleidoscopic effect that we can trigger with the D#. So that's all of the effects that we're going to want in our project, and now we can start to rearrange them. So this is kind of like the final 5 to 10 minutes of the project. So at the moment, it's all a bit kind of clustered. Things aren't really in their right places. It looks a bit funny. So what we're going to do is we're going to rearrange this in a way that looks a bit more interesting. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag the vision up to the top of this list, just after the audio listener. So that's the first thing in the chain. So everything else follows that. And then after that, we're going to have the degrade, because that's a really important one to have. We want our bloom and whatever else to follow that underneath. And then we're going to have our mirror script above that. So just after degrade, we're going to have mirror. And then we're going to have data mosh. And this is just how I've arranged it. But again, it's all about playing about and seeing what you think looks coolest. This is just one that I think looks cool, but I'm really curious to see what you guys come up with. So let's drag tube next in the chain, and then we can have, I think, bloom, ramp, and then I think finally vignette's a nice one to end off on. And now if we hit play, we have a kind of slightly nicer arrangement of things where, one thing's not overlapping the other in any, too significant way that looks out of place. So now when I do my data mosh, it's using the pixels from the degrade as opposed to, the actual shape of the objects. So we're getting kind of continuity across the project. So that's nice. Just check that everything's still working. Let's turn on our bloom. Yeah, there we go. That's nice. Very cool. What do you think, Toby?
I love it.
It's got some cool effects going there.
Oh, definitely.
And okay.
Looking at it here in the project preview window, it's a bit sluggish and slow.
Yeah.
But when you export it, will it be?
Yeah, super smooth, smooth. So I think it's sluggish at the moment because of Skype's just like slow data transfer for screen sharing. It's super smooth on my end, but you may have varying performance on your computer or whatever PC or Mac you're doing it on. So don't be afraid if it's a bit jittery. It'll look great once you import it into the app because it's exporting at a slightly lower resolution with a whole series of different graphical options changed to make it run smoothly on your device. So it'll look a lot better. Okay, so we can save this, and now we can start to export it. So just make sure that all your patches are good to go and that everything's running properly, and we can start to export it. So perhaps in the meantime, whilst everyone's checking that they've got all their patches done, I'm just going to show you a couple more effects that you can kind of have a look at that you might want to add. So isoline is a really cool one that you can try out after the live stream. Binary is quite a nice one. That's kind of like a Game Boy effect. Analog glitch emulates like when your TV's not working and it's doing those sliding frames. What else? Contour currently isn't supported or isn't working properly in the OPZ app, so I'd stay away from that. Originally, I had done this project with Contour, but I've been told that for now that's not working properly, so I'd stay away from that. Digital glitch. That's a cool one. A lot of video packs that I've seen use that effect. It's this one here. If people are familiar with it, it's quite a cool one. I don't really use it very much, but it can have some really cool effects. So check out Kino Image Effect. That's got some nice stuff. Ramps and a really nice effect, as well as the image effects. These are slightly more specific, but stuff like Photomatic allows you to Photomatic and halftone. Photomatic allows you to change the contrast and the colors. And here I'll just show you. You can just like change the hue, saturation, brightness of your project, and that's actually a really nice effect. So you could, for example, assign a float animation that's creating an LFO, a repeating LFO, which then sends to the hue of the Photomatic effect, and then you can have it changing colors psychedelically. So DM me if you need help figuring that out, but I think see what you can come up with. But yeah, just have a look about, see if you can find some effects. But for now, we're just going to export the project. So to export, we've first got to save. So make sure that there's no little asterisk in the scene name. Now I've just created it on the sample scene, but if you want to, you can rename the scenes, create a new scene. I think sample scene for most things works fine. It's not great practice when you're coming to making games, but it's not really, it's not too serious when you're creating video packs, I think. So we can now select the scene asset, and this little label will come up. And what's happening when you right-click and select scene asset is essentially inside of this project viewer, it's going into scenes and it's selecting that little Unity scene, and it'll bring up this tiny little drop down, and this is actually where we create the name of the video pack. So we're going to create new, and we're going to call it Pulse, or whatever you want to name your project. And then now when we export, it will create a video pack called Pulse. And so when you're in the app, on the little selection viewer, that's where the name will come from. So now we can go through and we can start to...
if there's a way to add custom images to the video packs. And I answered it's not possible yet, with yet being the key word here. Hopefully we can add that. It's been something we've been talking about for sure, but right now it's not possible, right, William?
Yeah, so depending on how you want to do it, in terms of just like, you know, going off with your phone, selecting an image and putting that in, not really. But if you want to have a set series of images that you just go between, you can create materials inside of Unity where you can just assign an image. So if I go into materials here and create a new material, you can actually just choose an image to put. So I won't show you how to do it, but if you Google around, you can just create a material that's an image. So you can have, you know, your face across a sphere if you really wanted to. And for some of my early video packs, I did one with Tom Dixon where it was literally just a picture of their bulb mapped onto a sphere, and it was that simple. And then I had some stuff coming out of it. So it's definitely possible to use images inside of video packs.
But this was for the icon, for the selector icon.
Oh, for the selector icon. Yes. Apologies.
No worries.
Yeah, currently I don't think that's...
No,
yeah,
exactly.
There's no way of doing that for now. You can create an icon for the app, but not inside of the OPZ app. No. So what we're going to do is we're now going to go through into our graphical options so that it's compatible with the latest version of the OPZ app. So this is kind of the final step, and it just requires going into the project settings. So we're going to go into Unity, we're going to select project settings, and then we're going to go graphics, I believe. Yeah, there we go. Nope, sorry, not graphics. Project settings. Let me just check my notes, because this is something that was quite recently changed, is the way that Unity exporting and OPZ app importing works between those. So let me just have a look for the specific section. Build settings, player settings. That's the one. Sorry, player settings. So you can actually find it a lot easier if you go Unity, then go to build settings under file, and then player settings. You can just hit that, and then it'll bring up this little inspector window. And we're going to go other settings and disable auto graphics API. So go Mac disable, and I'm just going to turn these off generally and drag up OpenGL Core on Mac and hit apply. So what this is doing is, because the current version of the OPZ app doesn't support Metal, it's essentially saying don't use this, use this type instead. So again, we're going to turn off auto graphics API on iPhone and auto graphics API on Android, and that's just so that it knows exactly what it needs to do in terms of compiling it, and it just makes sure that it runs properly. So now that we've done that, we can go back here, select scene asset again, and now we can build it. So this is ready to go. And to build, you just go to assets and build video packs. So this is the final step. So you can now go to, for example, your desktop, and we can just export it. So I'm going to go documents. Let's have a look. Videolab, and then hit choose. And now it will build your video pack. This is the final step. You're good to go. And this is really where you'll find that you accidentally did something wrong and now it's all crashed. So if you've done anything wrong, this is where it will present itself, but you should be good to go. And again, I recommend that you use Unity 2018.2 I'm using 2018.2.20, but it also supports 2018.4. That's a bit kind of untested at the moment, and I personally stick with that. So you'll see here that you might get some compile errors. Let's have a look at if it's built properly, and then we can address these if they come up. I do tend to get these quite frequently, but I'm speaking with the guy who's doing the video lab at the moment to get these kind of sorted out so that it's not a problem. But just avoid them for now, and we can have a look and see if it's worked. So I'm just going to get my iPhone cable and plug in my phone, and let's see if it's worked.
What do you think, guys? That's pretty intense, but I think, yeah, it's pretty clear still. And it seems like there's a lot of potential use cases for whatever you can come up with.
Absolutely. So let's have a look at what we can come up with. So if I go into Finder, so the first thing to do is to create a videopaks folder. So there's one of two ways to do this, and depending on how many videopaks you've got and how many things you've already got on your OPZ app, you can do this differently. You can just create a videopaks folder on your Finder and then just drag and drop it. But for now, I'm going to show you the best practice situation. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create two Finder folders. And then on this one, I'm going to select William Gunning's iPhone. So this is my phone. Wait for it to load. And then as we did in the previous video, we're going to go into Files, scroll down until we find OPZ. Give it a moment. It'll maybe take a while to open up. And this is on the latest version of macOS. So for some people, if you're running Mojave or earlier, this is Catalina. If you're running Mojave or earlier, because they hadn't scrapped iTunes yet, you would do this through iTunes. I'm using Catalina, so this is where I go to do this. And to answer Venkata's question, it does not work at all on 2019, Unity 2019. I wouldn't try it because it's not currently supported. I think each update it's getting closer and closer to 2019, but for the time being, I'd stay right away from 2019 because you can have some serious issues. Okay, moving on. So you can see that we've got these three folders. You want to stay away from Unity. You can play about with Photomatic if you want. This is a really nice place to import images for Photomatic without having to, individually select each one, swipe, select, swipe, select, swipe. You can just dump them on and then rename the text file. That's a nice place to do that. But for now, we're going to focus on videopaks. So if we just drag and drop this onto, I'm going to drag and drop it onto my desktop folder. But you can drag and drop it wherever you want. And it's currently created this videopaks 2 because I've already got a videopaks folder. So actually, perhaps here, I'll just name this videopaks : or actually, no, let's go videopaks //. Okay, so now we've got our videopaks folder. And if we go inside of this, it'll have all of the current videopaks that you have. I'm going to delete my current version of Pulse so that that doesn't interfere. So this was the preview one that I made to show Toby. But we can just drag and drop what we had previously, what we have created, sorry, into that. So I'm just going to create another tab. You don't have to have this many tabs, but I like having it that way. So, okay, so I think I built it into videolab. Yep, there we go. Pulse. So just copy and paste that. Copy Pulse, paste. And if you're doing this through Windows, iTunes is the way to go. There is, I think, on the GitHub, there's how to do it through iTunes still as well. It's fairly simple. It's the same procedure. You want to just go onto the files on your phone. But it's super basic. Okay, so now we've created our videopaks folder. And we can go back into our phone and drag and drop it back on. So if you take that folder, drag it back into the OPZ app, and it'll ask you if you want to replace it. Or it might not, depending on how it's feeling.
I don't think it asks. It just idles.
It just does it.
And then
Okay.
updates it. At least for me.
Okay.
But maybe.
So perhaps the easiest thing to do then is, and I used to do this quite frequently, is you can just delete the videopaks folder and then put it back on if you're not certain that it's importing, because there it is. It will now paste it onto there. Hopefully sometime soon. It can be a bit slow, and I think that's just down to the fact that it's a wire connection to your phone using Finder, which probably isn't like the best. But just give it a moment to sync it up. And Toby, I can send you the file as well if you'd like.
I'd be happy to.
Let's have a look.
And maybe we can share this.
Yeah, of course. I can send it to you, and then you can distribute it however you want as a freebie. Here, I'll send it to you now, so that you can load it up on your screen, which might be slightly nicer than on mine.
I actually need to end the stream very soon, so we'll have to share it in comments.
But yeah, so essentially you just drag and drop the videopaks file onto here, eject your phone, and it should sync up. And then if you go to the OPZ app, you should see it come up in the videopaks folder. And then you're done. You can connect your OPZ and play about with your Pulse. That's it. It should work. Finn. That's
should work.
Creating a videopak.
Wow, really grateful to get this knowledge off of you. Chad has been praising you while you've been doing this, so thank you so much, William.
It's my pleasure.
And we already got a request for part 3, maybe. So
let's do it.
Yeah, let's do this.
If you're up for it, I'm up for it.
Sure. So what I mentioned before, we're gonna clip these videos and make them into a tutorial, and maybe do part 3 included, or we'll figure it out. But so these streams will be up for you to check out, and then we'll update with the video as well later.
Awesome.
William, will you be hanging out in the chat a while, or?
Yeah, I can hang out in the chat for a bit. I'm free to do that. If anyone has any questions, again, if after the live stream you've got any questions, just message me through Instagram. I had a few people after the first stream texting me through that. So just feel free to bug me, really. I don't mind. If you've got questions, just ask. It can be super daunting at first. So to have someone to explain it to you is, I think, probably very useful. Thanks for watching, guys.
Thank you so much, everybody who joined in, who came in a bit late. Don't worry, it's you can just catch the stream or catch the video. And William, do you want to share your in the comments? Yes. Do you want to share your information? So here's on the screen, and William will be available in the chat for a while now after as well. But for now, I think thank you so much. And
there we go.
There we go. Perfect. Now you
well done.
Now you know where to ask.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for having me on, Toby.
Oh, for sure. Thank you so much. See you again soon.
Yeah. See you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, wow, that was intense. Thank you so much. Round of applause for William. Hey, I got the decotora. I wasn't gonna go here. I was gonna go here to my regular setup, but doesn't matter. Guys, I need to end the stream, but like we said, William is available, and we will be back next week. Let me get this. Oh. Let's get you guys up here as well. There we go. So we got an email and the hashtag. So if you want to send us stuff, please use that. I'd love to share your amazing work. So please don't be a stranger. See you again next week. Next week is going to be a very interesting stream. It will be on Wednesday the 29th. So make sure you drop by then. We will announce more details later, but you don't want to miss it for sure. So take care for now. Stay safe and have a good one. Peace.